Hello, everybody. It's Heather. I have not gone live in a really long time. And today I decided to bring on two amazing gents. The first is Chester Elton. He is the apostle of appreciation. So we're going to be hearing some good stuff. And the next one is Garry Ridge. And whether you're looking at this live right now or you'll get to it later, that's fine. But you're going to get some really positive energy, some good things to lead you into this next week, this next month, these next months, this next year, just by what we're going to do here. So it's me and the two bald guys. I that's where we're at right now. It's like they're the twins and I whatever. So here's the funny thing. There's this so Garry, I know. Well, I think I was introduced to him just through like Humans First, and we were just in the same circle, and I asked him to come on the show and then come on my podcast. I think he's been on the show at least two, maybe this is the third time, I cannot remember. And then he is in my book, the new upcoming book in April, The Art of Caring Leadership, as one of the caring leaders that really highlights the ROI of being a caring leader and putting your people first as a strategy in your organization. And then all of a sudden I was on LinkedIn and I saw like somehow they were like Chester and Garry were together. And I was like, oh, and then I started seeing Chester's posts and they were so positive about gratitude. And I thought so I reached out to Chester asking him to write the foreword for my book because appreciation is one of the pillars inside there. And it's so important in the workplace. So that's how I know these gents, but then they know each other. How do you two know each other besides this?
We ran into each other in a train. No, not really.
Could have been.
Chester and I are part of a wonderful group, 100 coaches. And back in the early days of this group, we happened to have the opportunity at one of the events to present together. And we got chatting later, and we just realized that we had one thing in common that was really important to us, and that was people, and how really if we could help spread the gospel of appreciation and spread the gospel of taking care of people. If we take care of our people, they'll take care of our customers will take care of our shareholders, all the stuff people say. So apart from the fact that we have the same hairdo, we have that in common. So that's how we got together.
Yeah,
I love it.
We've been fast friends ever since. And it's so funny because, Heather, when you reached out to me, you said, hey, I know Garry Ridge. He thinks we should meet. And I thought, done. I mean, it was, that's like the best referral ever. Garry Ridge says she's okay. She's okay by me. So, that's the friendship circle of trust, right?
Absolutely.
It is, and it's so funny because like I'll text Chester now and I'll just be like, hey, you have. He's like, yep, I'm on it. And it's just like we've been friends forever or something. It's an odd, it just is what it is. So I think that sometimes you're just called to be in that kind of circle, that kindred spirit circle of folks that care for people, and so I think this is the caring for people circle right here. So if you need some help with that, you come to the three of us for sure, right?
Absolutely. Oh, and by the way, happy Australia Day. G'day. It's Australia Day today. So,
oh my gosh. Oh, this is why didn't I not know that? See, I should have looked that up. I got to be more thoughtful that way.
It was actually Australia Day yesterday, but it's Australia Day today. So,
right.
Oh, and what does that
if someone tells you the world's going to end tomorrow, just call Australia. If they're still there, it's not happening.
It's not true, yeah. And you should say COVID-free Australia Day.
Well, just about, yeah. They're certainly handling it. They're handling it pretty well down there. So,
that's awesome. What is it? Do they celebrate on Australia Day? Is it like a big celebration?
Yeah, it's a big holiday. We do, us Aussies, if we were there, do what we normally do. We go to the beach and eat some great seafood and swim in the ocean and see our mates and eat meat pies and lamingtons and celebrate, celebrate the founding of Australia back in 1788. So, I still call Australia home. Great song.
And you're in San Diego, though, right?
I am, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. That's a long way. Australia is on my list. It's a bucket list item. It's like I've got like a couple right before it, and then Australia is there. But with all these kids and school, and oh my goodness, that we would need to be going awfully long to be able to do that. So, well, I wanted us to get on here because one of the things that I think we all are seeing, we saw obviously last year in 2020 with the pandemic and all the racial unrest, just the crazy stuff. And we talked about this before, Gary, when we were on the show before, but now we go into 2021, and of course everybody's expecting like it's a new year and everything has changed. It's like I'm feeling like in the workplace, maybe not. One thing I'm seeing, one trend I'm seeing in the workplace, which is a good thing, is that organizations really are embracing the need to be more diverse, more inclusive, have a culture of belonging. I am seeing more of it, so that then organizations are following through with plans and strategies and tactics to line up. So that's one good thing I'm seeing. I think the one thing that's not good that I'm seeing is probably something Chester can speak out, which is this idea of anxiety around the unknown, this unknown factor still of like not having the vaccine and not knowing if they're going to still have jobs and all this. I don't know if you can speak to that, Chester. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, listen, I think people are just worn out. We thought, and there was a lot of misinformation early on. We were going to lock it down, flatten the curve, stay home for a couple of weeks. Isn't this kind of nice? Well, a year later, we're like, I'm just worn out. And it is really interesting. The latest surveys show that I think it was 64% of employees surveyed said anxiety was their number one issue. Anxious about health, anxious about family, anxious about work, finances, the rent, you name it. And it was interesting. I was on a virtual conference not too long ago, and the CHRO of Cisco was there. Hundreds of thousands of employees. They did the same survey. 85% of their employees said anxiety was their number one work. So, this is where organizations like WD40 and leaders like Garry really shine. Anybody can be a great leader in good times, right? And when you have really tough times, you have a crisis, you have a pandemic, whatever it might be, the organizations that really care about their people, they put their people first. And I love the way, Garry talks about his tribe. We're not coworkers, we're not teammates, we're tribe members. We defend each other, we cheer for each other, we feed each other, we build each other up. Those are the organizations where when you need to take a beat and say, look, my kids aren't learning at school, my parents are sick, I can't go see them, and on, I need to take off a couple of 3 days. It's okay to say that, because in so many organizations, it's not. And because you're already anxious about your job, you don't feel safe even asking. And so what happens? It's just, the cycle keeps going and keeps going. So, yeah, I think more than ever, the caring organizations, the organizations where you can be vulnerable, you can be honest, you can go to your manager and say, look, I just need some time off. Those are the organizations on the back end, because we saw it with WD-40 in the last recession, right? Invested in their people, hunkered down, took care of everybody, and then, skyrocketed, whether it was the stock price or engagement scores or customer satisfaction. And I think the same thing is going to happen here. So, long answer to a short question, but Garry, I'll pass it to you. I mean, it has ever been and always will be. It's all about your people, right?
Yeah, thanks, Chess. Yeah, what we have is everybody's going through their own personal hero's journey right now. And if you think about uncertainty or anxiety, probably fairly similar. Uncertainty is a series of future events that may or may not occur. And if you think about, the circle of uncertain events, most of them don't occur. Right. So it's our job as leaders to create that place of safety. And what does that mean? Transparency, openness, communication, true caring, gratitude, taking the time to really appreciate the hard things that people are going through, because they're going through tough stuff. And as Chester said, the tribe is a group of people that come together to both protect and feed each other. So that's what we've been concentrating on. And, who knew nearly a year ago that we'd still be in this state today? And many organizations have been drawing deeply down on what I would call the cultural equity. Well, unfortunately, a lot of organizations entered this roller coaster ride with very little or no cultural equity. And I think the big wake-up call to leadership now is, what is your learning moment here? Now is the time to really focus on what you need to focus on to build a great culture. And I have an algorithm for that. Culture equals, and the equal sign means happens when, parentheses, values plus behavior, close parentheses, are done consistently. So organizations need to have a set of compelling described values that set people free. The leaders have to love their people enough and be brave enough, not only to show them gratitude when they do great things, but to redirect the behavior when they need to redirect it, and they have to do it consistently, day after day after day after day. And if you do that, you build a strong culture, and a strong culture will take you through any crisis that you want to go through, because it's that time when you need people to be together with that circle of safety and trust. And that's what's important to us today. So it's been amazing.
And I will say, Gary, you say you got to draw down on your reservoir of culture. Well, unfortunately, there were a lot of companies that went into the crisis with no, equity in that bank. They hadn't nurtured it. We talk about it all the time. Culture is what happens every day, not just at the year-end party. By the way, shameless plug, great little book here.
Pull yours out too.
Yeah, you can read it fast, and those pillars and so on, because it is really interesting, about anxiety. My dad used to have a funny saying. He said, "Don't tell me not to worry, because 99% of the things I worry about never happen." And so it is. We build up this angst around stuff that, in most cases, never happens, and yet it eats up so much of our time and so much of our soul. That's when you've got to have trusting leaders you trust, that you can call and go to and get that mentorship. One of the things Gary has said, and I used it often, is the learning moment, that great leaders are forged in crises. Why do we revere Winston Churchill? Well, because in a crisis, he was the guy. I grew up in Canada. Gary grew up in Australia. Churchill is this lion that we idolize, and it is true. And we are in a crisis right now. Our leader's going to step up. What will you be remembered for? What will be your legacy? Will you be the leader that cared about their people and led them through and came out stronger on the other end, or were you the leader that was absent? Were you the leader that was ridiculously demanding and asked so much of your people that you burned people out? I mean, this is a leadership moment, and should not be forgotten.
That reminded me, Chester, during the last financial crisis, there's a museum in San Diego of the aircraft carrier. And I was down on this aircraft carrier in the museum doing a tour, and it's the Midway. And I got onto the bridge, and there was this very enthusiastic retired military guy telling me all about the activity on the bridge. And he said to me, "Do you know that the captain of the bridge actually has two places where he hangs out? He has his stateroom downstairs, and in a time of battle, there's a bunk bed here that he sleeps on. Because in a time of battle, the captain never leaves the bridge. In fact, see this big chair sitting here? He sits in this chair so that the flight crew on the flight deck can actually see him in the time of battle. And unfortunately, in times of battle, weak-kneed leaders go into hiding. Right. So, this is when we have to be up front. We have to be there. Leadership is like playing on Broadway. The lights are on 24 hours a day, and you better be dancing because people are watching the act. And that's what's so important about, what we do and what we think about these days, because we are there to take care of our people. As Simon Sinek says, leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of the people in your charge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that when you give that quote. There's a couple things that stood out for me. One, I always love, I don't know if it came from you, but you always say it, that idea of setting them free. I can't remember the exact sentence, but it's giving them this thing that sets them free. What was that sentence again? You always say it, and I love it, Gary.
A set of values that set people free.
Yeah, I love that. I just love it because it makes me think of how employees often see their experiences in the workplace. And I think that's true today now than it ever has been, where they feel almost like slaves to the leaders who don't care, slaves to a lack of gratitude or appreciation for the work they do in the workplace, right? And so this idea of values that sets them free, really, I don't know, it gives me a good visual for what that represents. And I know you take that to heart. And I talk about that a lot. I think the values are important. You don't just talk about them, you live them. And how do you actually hold people accountable for not living them is a question that I always want leaders to be thinking about in organizations. The other thing that I was thinking about is when you talk about learning moment, one of the things that happened in 2019, I did a TED Talk on transforming adversity into opportunity. This was nowhere in our view. So the pandemic was not here. Obviously racial issues have been around for years and years and years, but the stuff that happened wasn't there. And then boom, everything happened last year. And boom, this idea of resilience and overcoming adversity was a big one. And one of my items on that list is learning. And I tell people that if you are in the middle of the place we're at right now, and you have not learned, then we can decide that this is a crisis. We can call it a crisis once we have failed to learn something, right? So that learning moment is just critical in all this, isn't it? Like every time we move forward, or even what you were talking about, I mean, the stuff that you just do, Chester, where you just put, every day, this idea of like gratitude. I mean, just to be focused on that helps you probably learn or unlearn some of the negative stuff that could be taking place every day, because you're choosing to do what I say, which is focusing on a mission that's bigger than yourself. You're looking like out here, and your focus is on what am I grateful for? And I'm just constantly looking at that. And that's bigger than anything that could happen to me right now. Right. Yeah.
I'll tell you, it's really interesting. University of Pennsylvania did this really interesting study with like the SEALs and the Rangers in the military. How do you deal with anxiety? And it's really interesting that one of the things they have the military do is expressions of gratitude. What are you grateful for? To calm that down. And, I mean, it's, as humans, we can't hold two emotions at the same time, right? You can't be anxious and grateful at the same time. So it was funny. We had a book pal was passing out these little gratitude journals, and they asked me and Adrian for a quote. And our quote was, you can't be in a state of anxiety and a state of gratitude at the same time. Choose gratitude. If you have a choice, choose that one, and you'll be better off. I'll tell you, the other thing that I think is really interesting is in a crisis, you carve out safe places. Where are you safe? And it's really interesting because we spend so much time at work. Isn't it interesting if you don't think work is safe emotionally, how does that ripple to the rest of your life and in your family and on and on? It's really interesting. You look at productivity. Productivity is up like 17%, 25% in different, because you've eliminated the commute. Everybody's available 24/7. People are working. They're anxious about that. And everybody wants to be productive because they want to keep their jobs. Well, how do you carve out safe places? Here's what was really fascinating. Cisco, again, at this conference, it left such an indelible impression on me. They did a survey of employee assistance programs. Everybody's got one. Hardly anybody uses it. So here's your skill testing question, Heather. Why don't people use the employee assistance program when they're completely stressed out? Why don't they do it?
Yeah. Well, I would think that it's just not marketed. Like it's not, they don't know about it enough and the benefits of it. Maybe we're not doing storytelling around how it's helped people. What did you find?
Actually, everybody knows about it. Nobody trusts it. Nobody believes that it will be anonymous. And Cisco said, our people are more comfortable talking to bots than real people because they're pretty sure that the bots won't gossip about them. So what we did with our new work is we said, okay, and we talked to a lot of different, psychologists and counselors and so on. They said, what people need when they deal with anxiety is a safe place. So along with our book, what we've done is we've created this online community. It's called WeThriveTogether.global. We couldn't get .com, so it's .global. WeThriveTogether.global. And it's literally a safe place to talk about anxiety and wellness in the workplace. And it's been up for like a couple of weeks. We already have almost 200 members. People are flocking to safe places. Now, back to the great leader. I guarantee you, because I've seen the numbers, that people at WD40 feel safe about talking about those issues. In your tribe, I'll bet you guys talk about it all the time, don't you?
Yeah. And, let me mention too, Chester, I was listening to your podcast on the weekend, which was fabulous. You had the CHRO on from GE, who was ex-American Express, I think, and Citibank or something like that.
Pepsi.
Pepsi. And he was talking about something similar to this around how people's anxiety is around not feeling safe or being in a place where they can trust people. And we create, you know about Al, right? Al is the soul-sucking CEO.
I got my Al right here. Yep, that's right.
But Al meets the carrot, right? The carrot has the answer. But,
I'm wanting those. You guys are teasing me. I'm wanting those. I told you.
But it's the behavior of people like Al, the soul-sucking CEO, that don't create trust. He doesn't do what he says he's going to do. He wants to micromanage. He doesn't like feedback. He manages through fear. All of these awful habits. No wonder people don't go home happy. And one of the things that I've been really interested in, and when we get back into being able to be together again, I often say, imagine a place where you go to work every day, you make a contribution to something bigger than yourself, you learn something new, you're set free and protected by a compelling set of values, and you go home happy. My thinking is, I'd love to stand in front of companies and see how many people come to work happy, because I reckon that would be a great indicator of the actual culture of an organization. Are people arriving just a minute after starting time? Are they, kind of creeping into their building or their desk, or are they there 5 minutes early, high-fiving each other and hugging each other? And, hey, it's great to be with you. So not only do we have a responsibility to send people home happy, but we have a responsibility as leaders to create a place where they want to go. Because pleasure in the work puts perfection in the job. Aristotle said that in 384 BC. We're just slow learners, right?
Wow.
And I think you make such a good point. When your alarm clock goes off in the morning, are you jumping out of bed, throwing your fist in the air and saying, yes, I get to go to work today? Or are you hitting the snooze button thinking, I can get another 10 minutes? Yeah. And you're right. We talk so much about sending people home happy. I love your take on that, Garry. Are they showing up happy? Are they glad to be here? That, I think, is by far the biggest indicator. Have you created a good culture?
Yeah. I was thinking, if I was going to acquire a company, the first bit of due diligence I would do would be to sit in the parking lot from 7 a.m. in the morning till 10 a.m. in the morning and just watch the people coming to work.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Well, and I was just the other day, I had Stephen M.R. Covey on, and we were talking about the speed of trust. And so as you talk about trust, and I think about it, I agree that right now, this idea of safe spaces and feeling comfortable to have these discussions with your manager in forums or roundtables or coffees. And you're right. I think too, this idea of you having over 200 people already, just having it in a couple of weeks, Chester, is totally an example. I created that HR community for that exact reason too. It's like, how do we create this space for these people who really are there? They're supposed to be there to, help employees and provide them the EAPs and all these things. They're supposed to be able to make sure they understand what those are. But if they don't understand how to access them, and they don't trust to even be able to use them, I think about that mental health services, any of those things outside of the formal programs, but just accessing, even just going to the doctor, thinking your employer is going to see something, about you. They don't even know if you're going to be able to see it, so that trustworthiness thing is so huge, isn't it?
Yeah. I want to make a point. We've only dropped 2 podcasts, by the way, available everywhere you get podcasts now. So look up Anxiety at Work by Gostick and Elton. It's really interesting. Our first interview was with Chris Rainey, and Chris Rainey is this wonderful entrepreneur, HR leaders out of London, puts on fabulous virtual conferences, fabulous in-person conferences before that. And we asked him, we said, so as you're talking to supervisors, managers, leaders, and somebody comes to you that's really anxious, what would you tell them to do? And his answer was so revealing. He said, as a leader, if I'm coming to you and I'm really anxious, I don't expect you to have the answers. I just want you to listen. Isn't that fascinating? They just, people that are, and we've all been in that state. We don't want somebody to give us all the answers. We just want somebody to care. And how do you express that caring? You just listen. And it was one of the biggest takeaways. I thought, that is brilliant.
It reminds me, Chester, of the work of our great friend, Michael Bungay Stainer, who wrote the book, The Coaching Habit. And his first 2 questions are, so what's on your mind? Listen. And what's the second question? and what else?
And what else? Yeah.
The first
Yeah,
two
like
questions.
get more. I want more.
What's
You're giving
on
it all
your
to me.
mind? Yeah, and what else?
I always like to ask people permission. Like I'll say to them, I want to make sure that you and I are on the same page. Do you want me to actually give you advice after this conversation, or do you want me to give you any feedback, or are you here for me just to listen? And I like to ask permission a lot, because otherwise I can get myself in some serious trouble, knee deep in it, right? Because I've made an assumption that they need me to give them an answer. So if I get it clear, if I give them, and if they say, I didn't really, but like now, could you give me feedback now? Even though I wasn't coming initially for that, you could do that. But now it's like I get the okay to do it. Otherwise, I'm just giving them my opinion and it's unsolicited.
Yeah.
It's in Marshall Goldsmith's book, the 20, what got you here won't get you there. One of the 20 bad habits we leaders want to do, add too much value.
Yeah. We get chatty. And, I had a personal experience with this that was just so riveting for me. My daughter lives out in Iowa City. They've got this wonderful bookmobile, the Antelope Lending Library. It's kind of their passion. She works at libraries, and she was having a tough time at work. And she was, telling me all about it, and she was getting really emotional. I said, well, let me coach you up on that. And I was giving her some advice, and she said, Dad, I don't want a coach. I want a dad.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, okay. Got it. And then I did. I just said, you're right, honey. Go ahead. I'm here. And everything changed. I don't want a coach. I just want a dad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can find myself often with 4 kids. I get in my own way a lot. I just do. I just get in my own way, and I get in my way of fully, truly connecting with them, a lot. And I have to just say, don't just go like lay on their bed and start talking to them, or just like sit on the edge of their bed. Like just, go in there just very low and don't go there, because otherwise I'm like, well, let's start fixing it. Let's fix you. Like that's what I'm really saying without saying, let's fix you. Let's fix you. Let's make the process. Let's make you happy. Like right now, instead of sometimes just allowing, and the same thing happens in the workplace, right? We have to allow people to be with them, but to have them feel, heard, and at the same time, valued as a person and valuable, because we're allowing them to use their voices to just express what they need. And then, like, as you talked about, Garry, just being safe. Like, I just want to talk, and you're not going to judge me. And if I need help, I'll ask for it. But in the meantime, you're just here as an ear. It's a sincere sign of caring leadership. It really is.
So one of the things Al doesn't have, which great leaders should have, is what I call bleeding tongue syndrome. You have to bite your tongue. You have to bite your tongue. When I went back to school many years ago, and my professor and my mentor, and someone who I owe so much to, is Ken Blanchard, and I learned something from him back then, and it's and I keep it in my mind all the time. It's WTW. Is what I'm about to say worth the words, or am I just wanting to hear myself? And so often I'm about to say something, and I can hear Ken say, "Is it worth the words, Garry? Is it worth the words?" And we've got to remind ourselves of that, because people do want to be heard.
It looks like Robin said that the thing that you talked about, Chester, about like, I don't need to be coached up. She's like, I've heard the same thing from my daughter. I think all of us have. As I make a lot of parallels often when it comes to leadership in the home or leadership at work. And I don't want it to sound like I'm someone's mother, right? But I have learned so much about leadership from my children. Like they teach me so much. And then I go, oh, yeah, I'll go write about that. I'll write about that, because I just messed that up. And I like to tell the story of how I messed this thing up and how my children just taught me this super valuable lesson that we can't we need to make sure that we utilize it often. So what other workplace trends are we seeing? Are we seeing anything else? Anything else besides, anxiety is a huge one. It's big. It's in our faces. Lack of trust that we talked about earlier is a big one. Are there any... And of course, I mentioned the positive one of that, organizations seeming to, many of them wanting to start this DEIB journey or go deeper with it to make it meaningful. Are there any either positive workplace trends that you're seeing right now?
I think one of the workplace questions that's really hovering around is the question of virtual. I've kind of started to say the following: we will never be a virtual company, but we'll be a better company because we're better at being virtual. And I was thinking about this morning in the context of gratitude, Ches, in that, there's nothing like a personal note or something to share gratitude, but there is something better. It's that looking in the eye, shaking your hand, or if it's appropriate, that hug to say, you know what, I really do appreciate you. And, I think that for companies who weren't necessarily, leaning into a more virtual environment at the beginning of COVID, and it became compulsory, we're now struggling with what does the future look like? And there's two schools. I know in our tribe, there's a huge number of people who are just pining to get back together again, to do some of the rituals we do, one that you've been to, Chester, where we burn and throw into the fire and let go of our emotions. And then there's the other group that say, well, we really like being virtual now. So we're going to have to, I think organizations, there's no right answer, but there is an answer for the right thing to do in organizations. So I know it's something that we're thinking a lot about, because you need to be together for creativity, for that emotional. We're social animals. We want to be with each other, whether we like it or not, over the time. So I think that's a trend that we've really got to think a lot about, because we could make the wrong decision too quickly.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. My son works at American Express, and they're estimating that they'll be at 10% capacity of their massive tower, down in 10% capacity by the end of the year. So, they found actually that as far as productivity and stuff goes, they can do a lot virtually. And I think Gary's absolutely right. This is going to be a really interesting learning curve, because more than anything, I think it comes back to that issue of safety. Do I feel safe going to work? And it was really interesting. And my son does a lot of analytics for American Express. And so I'm not sharing any, formulas for Coke or anything, but he said, it's really interesting. People, when they're at work, feel really safe. It's getting to work that is really an issue. You got to get on a train. You got to get on a subway. You got to go up the elevator. Once you're there, you're fine. It's the to and from. And so this whole idea of being really sensitive to how will you feel safe? Are you going to feel safe coming into work 3 times a week? Or is it going to be once a week? Is it going to be that we're going to need more rural offices so that you don't have to go up an elevator, right? It's going to be really interesting to see the transformation in the workplace, because I agree with Gary 100%. There's nothing better than going to lunch, being in a meeting, having a whiteboard. It's, you can jump up in a race and do whatever and be creative together. At the same time, if the whole time I'm there, I'm worried about getting sick, it's not worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I when I was listening to Gary, I was thinking about how I used to advise clients often about the employee experience and looking at it as a journey. And now that if we still want the experience, we want a good experience in place. It's not the experience, because the experience before is not going to be the experience now, but gauging what the experience needs to be for them along the way. So thinking about onboarding new employees in this virtual environment has been a big problem for many organizations. So helping them think outside the box on how do you still maintain a positive experience for those employees coming in when they haven't met their coworkers in person. What do you do to leverage even just the virtual? You're going to have to do it unless you're starting to do social distancing in the office, and you can still kind of do, a little bit of it, but not be too close. So don't get too close.
I observed something the other day. Interesting. I observed something the other day. We've been onboarding some new tribe members during this period. And what we've been doing is using these Kudos Boards, where you can go on and you can post a message and, welcome to the tribe and whatever. And I happened to be in our building, which we call our teepee, the other day. And one of the new tribe members who has an office there, works in IT, had come in to do some stuff. And she'd actually framed the Kudos board and was hanging it in her office. And I'm thinking, wow, why didn't we ever do that when we weren't in COVID
Right.
roller coaster time, because she said, I love this. Here it is. Look at all the warm messages. Now, we used to send emails and stuff, but we just added that little bit to it. It's like there are so many things that we have that have become compulsory that we're learning from. I was talking to, I'm chairman of the CEOs Against Cancer in San Diego, and we had a meeting yesterday, and we were talking about, you know, the way that they raise money. It used to be, you know, galas, and everybody kind of got dressed up and went to these things. And I think there's some people who really like galas, and there's some that don't. You know, believe it or not, I'm an introvert. I don't really like the gala too much. But this year they had a virtual gala. So what they did was, you know, we had people sign up, and they sent the meals to the home, and we sat at home and had our camera and we blah, blah. I said, well, why don't we do both? We can now have, for the people who want to go there and put on their fancy shoes and get dressed up and be part of the, you know, the speed dating of getting to know each other, they can do that. But those of us who want to sit at home and still enjoy the event, we could have both. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot we've been forced into that we can learn from going forward. That is a real advantage. So these are, you know, other trends of behaviours that we just don't miss them. You know, that's one of the things that we've been working on a lot in the last few weeks is what do we want to stop, what do we want to start, and what do we want to reset due to what we've learned at COVID? What do we want to do more of? What do we want to do less of? And what do we want to do differently, having been through this experience?
Yeah,
I love that.
This hybrid model. I think you're exactly right, Gary. You know, because I can't wait to get back to normal. You're never getting back to normal. It's not going to happen. You know, I mean, you know, as much as you and I traveled before COVID, you know, you say, well, what are some of the things you're grateful for? I say, well, I haven't experienced jet lag in a long time. You know, I've had Zoom lag. You know, I did a conference in Malaysia and had to get up like at 3 a.m. or something to get on the Zoom call. And yet I didn't have to go to the airport. I didn't have to check into the hotel. I didn't, you know, and so there are some positives there as well. And this hybrid model, like you say, why can't we do both? You know, have a conference in Malaysia and the Malaysian speakers are there and Gary and I Zoom in. Nothing wrong with that. Everybody knows how to do it now. Everybody knows how to do it.
You did it for us just recently, graciously. You know, I teach a class at USD, and we were able to Zoom Chester in as our guest speaker on a Sunday morning, and we would not probably been able to do that if it wasn't that we got comfortable with it, and it was fabulous. Again, thank you. It was a real gift to our students. Appreciate it.
And I think you're right. When we're looking at the employee journey, you're looking at this experience, it's going to change. So I would say for organizations, anybody struggling out there, you really are going to have to step outside that zone. You're going to have to step outside of what was before and do exactly what Gary was talking about, which is, you know, what do we want to do? We want to stop, and what do we want to like just change? Like, what is it we're going to do to change? And I also, the idea of the hybrid model really does provide more of a custom experience for employees. And so now it really makes organizational leaders dive deeper into what the needs of their employees are, right? So they have to listen more effectively. They have to then aggregate all that feedback up to say, okay, it looks like we have 2 groups of people, 3 groups of people. I don't know what that is, but then design the experience that is not a cookie cutter, that actually it's a good experience for the organization, but it's more custom and it feels personal. And that's going to keep people with you. It's going to keep people with you, even if for now they can't go back to the office, but maybe they have a hope for it. But in the end, you have to know, you can't make assumptions. I can't stay. When they say about assumptions about the ASS, it is so true, isn't it? And it's even more true in the workplace when we're not asking our people about it. And then also, by the way, Gary, I am on the board here of ACS here in Colorado. So look at that. I actually did the virtual gala too and had people, I brought food. I got food delivered to me and I brought food to all of my guests' homes. I dropped it off. And then I got them all in virtually. So we had like my screen on and their screen on. And it was just like, whoa, this is a whole new world. But we have to do that, right? We have to be willing to rock and roll. It's a new day. It's just a new world. And we have to be thinking differently in it.
Yeah, I don't want to leave that point that Gary made too quickly about I zoomed into his university class. Whereas before he'd say, hey, when are you going to be in California? You know, and on and on and on. And can we pick up your hotel and do whatever? I mean, this opportunity to be able to beam people in from literally all around the planet. I mean, this is a microcosm right here. We got New Jersey, Colorado, and California. and we can do it at a moment's notice. You could have called us last night and said, "Hey, are you guys available?" We would have said, "Sure." There's no way you would have called us last night and said, "Can you jump on a plane?" We'd go, "No."
That's not happening.
And yet now the reaction is delighted. Of course.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
For you, Heather, done.
We just experienced it last weekend, Chester, right? We're now 100 coaches group. We had, we would have loved to have been together in California or in Nashville or wherever we're going to be and get together. But we had, at one stage, 200 people from around the world on this wonderful learning experience. And, I thought when it came up, I'm going to get bored with this. But I couldn't leave the screen. I mean, it was like, wow. It was wow. And all of the different, points of view that came in. Talk about being able to have diversity. Now we have diversity via Zoom because we can actually bring people in and gather their points of view. It's really cool.
Oh yeah, I love that.
There was one really great comment. People afterwards, because we have smaller groups, and said, "What did you?" Marshall said, "What did you guys think of the weekend?" One guy says, "I was gobsmacked." I love that. I was gobsmacked at how many amazing people, and I'll bet you there were easily 50 countries on that call.
Easily, yeah. It was fabulous. Yeah.
Well, this you guys are just wonderful. We hadn't had as many people show up. I think we've got like 5 or 6 people on, but that's all right because remember I always show this out, so I'll send it out and it'll be housed on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Facebook. So anybody that wants to get to it, I'll obviously send you the links to, so you can always share it out too. But for anybody who is right now might be struggling, looking at the trends, figuring out what to do, as you can see. The time right now requires more care, not less, more connection, not less. And we can be creative on how we're connecting. And it just depends on what your workplace requirements are right now. But just keep that in mind that this is the things we've talked about is really not rocket science. It's hard. It's not common practice, but it's not hard to do if you just really care enough to want to do it. And of course, now I've got these 2 amazing leaders on here. And like I mentioned earlier, both Chester wrote the foreword for my next book, and Garry is one of the leaders highlighted in it as a leader with heart, a caring leader, and just how to do it right. And none of us are perfect. And this is not a display of perfection, and we never talk about that. It's about a journey towards getting better every day. And that's even what this is about. When we look at workplace, the trends inside your organization, what are you doing to just get better a little bit every day, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And even a dumbass can do it.
Well, thank you to my 2 bald friends. And I'm looking for those cushy little things sometime soon, the carrot and the real mean manager.
Yeah, we got them both. Yes. It is interesting. My dad used to tell a joke. He said, "Did you hear about the 2 bald guys?" I said, "No." He said, "Yeah, they put their heads together and made an ass of themselves."
You got it. You got it.
Everybody was saying great conversation. So we got Robin with great conversation, and then someone else who I'm not sure who this is great conversation. So I'm glad you got good insights. I got good energy. I'll be able to get through the rest of my day with some oomph. So I appreciate you, gentlemen. We'll be in touch. Always. I'll be talking to you.
Thanks, Heather.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.